Episode 39.
Is it really?
As you know, yeah.
Wow.
Episode 39.
Nice.
39. We're almost to 40, as you can see.
Yeah. That's kind of cool. Actually, the next episode we do will be 40, and you and I are both 40. Maybe we should do something for that.
That's true. We can stop. We can only do as many episodes as years have we been alive.
See you guys next year.
Oh, God. Speaking of listenership, as you know...
After that.
Oh, you think it would drop off? Can it drop off from nothing? I mean, what happens?
We owe listeners at that point.
Yeah. As you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Measure of an Episode.
The Measure.
Where the Measure of an Episode, where our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a genuine Star Trek episode, and not just pretend, not just a masquerade of images that look like they might be Star Trek, but actually aren't. I'm Paul.
I'm confused.
Confused? What are the criteria by which we judge these episodes?
Number 1 is there sci-fi integral to the plot? Is it woven in like a tapestry, as it were? Is it required to make this episode?
What's number 3?
And the third one is the moral or ethical dilemma. Is there a moral or ethical dilemma in the episode? In the thing. Is there that?
No, very good. Well said.
I'm very eloquent.
This week we watched the original series, season 3, episode 17, That Which Survives, where they happen upon a witch on a planet. By the way, have you seen witches?
I didn't think about that.
That witch survives.
Which witch? That witch.
Yeah, there's many witches that they're deciding who's going to live or die.
Yeah.
That's just a snippet of that conversation.
Well, and what's nice is this episode, you're seeing the title and you're like, oh, well, what survives? And they tell you at the end. That was nice. I'm glad that they clarified. Oh, that's the thing, that which survives.
Do they?
Yeah.
I must admit maybe that was my note at the end that I didn't finish, where I wrote kind of disappointing solution to a mystery, but maybe that.
Well, yeah.
Maybe I was referring to the that in the title, but maybe that.
maybe that.
What? Oh, did I read the thing? Let me read the blurb. After Enterprise landing... Oh, I forgot about this stupid...
All the adjectives, yeah.
Yeah. After Enterprise landing, party members beam down to investigate a geologically interesting planet. Their ship is hurled across the galaxy. I could not have read that worse, by the way. There's no scenario that I could have read that. After Enterprise landing, party members beam down to investigate a geologically interesting planet. Their ship is hurled across the galaxy.
Yeah,
which is true.
Yeah, and that's it's. I guess the only thing it doesn't provide is the tension conflict that happens. Like the crew on the planet must try to survive, or something like that.
You half expect them to say something about a lost civilization, where they encounter a lost civilization that whatever, but they don't say that, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
I mean that's why I think I remember being excited about this episode in the last one, because it is sort of a mystery.
Oh, absolutely.
Without the answer in the blurb.
Yes, I think that it was a little bit too Star Trek as far as the characters go, specifically Spock. But yeah, this was definitely a solid Star Trek episode.
Yeah, and very entertaining. I mean, it kind of reminded me of what a Next Gen episode. It felt very proto Next Gen to me.
Yes, 2 plots and kind of peeling back layers, and yeah, it wasn't
right.
It wasn't telecast. What is that? It wasn't telegraphed. There we go. It wasn't telegraphed.
Although
from the beginning.
There is something about this episode that was very strange, and I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that they're in their last season and fairly close to the end of their last season. So from the very beginning, and so the first scene is they come across this mysterious planet, and you know me, I love it that we're kind of right into the action.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first thing that they say is, we've come across this weird planet, let's go investigate. But throughout this whole episode, they're doing a lot of this 2 + 2 = 4. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Where they're giving us the 2 + 2 and the equals 4. So instead of just giving us the 2 + 2 and letting the audience figure it out, like they're giving us everything we need to know, just let us make that last step to figuring out what they're trying to say. They don't do that. They give us everything.
Well, do you have an example? Because I remember them saying...
An atmosphere could not evolve in so short a period of time.
And yet it has.
Evidently. But the inconsistencies are so compounded as to present a seemingly impossible phenomenon.
But a fascinating one, Mr. Troy.
Precisely, Captain.
And the only thing they leave out is, I should probably stay tuned to this channel to find out what happens next. Right? It was really weird. I've never seen that on a Star Trek episode before. And it's all throughout the show. Hopefully, future editing Paul, will put this example in.
Yeah. Please.
All these different examples.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Right. No, I agree.
It's like, oh, that was easy. You just have to sit here and let him do all the work in his mind.
Well, no.
Anyway,
so you're going to play that sound clip, and that's me agreeing with you. Yeah, no.
But to me, I didn't grab onto that until after you finished.
Right.
And so I was like, is he having a stroke?
I don't know if you caught it as much as I did, but there were so many moments where Spock it's like he regressed to being almost completely Vulcan and robot-like, where he was not understanding colloquialisms. Well,
he was kind of Dick Spock.
Yeah.
A little bit, because he had absolutely he understood what everybody was saying. He just had no time for it. It's almost like he was channeling Janeway this whole episode. Right. Because he honestly he did not have time for humans in this episode.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Like there was something about the Uhura saying chances are, and he said like, this is not a time for gambling.
Yeah. It was kind of jokey joke.
Right.
There's a lot of jokey joke stuff in this stuff, but also in the sense that where everyone was trying to speculate of what was happening and kind of doing the human thing of expecting the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. He was kind of squashing that. I liked that about Spock in this episode, was that he was saying, no, we don't have any evidence or data to support what you're saying. Why don't we go ahead and continue on using the evidence we actually do have and the data we do have to try and find an answer. That's sort of the Star Trek part of this whole episode for me.
Well, and I liked the bit when they're trying to defuse the matter-antimatter chamber, where Scotty says, we don't have time for that. And Spock is kind of like, well, if I don't, we're all going to die anyway. So why don't I do it?
Yeah. There's actually a lot of candor in this episode. And it's probably because they were in their last season, so they had really gotten a hold on the back and forth and what the characters were. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things where Kirk says,
"Why? What is it, Jim?"
A planet even Spock can't explain.
Once the ship is sort of rocked back and forth, Uhura says,
Mr. Spock, are you all right?
Yes, I believe no permanent damage was done.
What happened?
The occipital area of my head seems to have impacted with the arm of the chair.
No, Mr. Spock, I meant, what happened to us?
Which was funny. I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. Like, finally we're getting a little glimmer of the Spock or the rest of the characters that we have in the movies.
Right.
Where there is kind of that casual undercurrent of character happening, even in the most serious of scenarios.
See, and for like, Spock was just a little too, like I said, just a little too Vulcan. Like he would not have responded in that way. Like on the planet, it made a little bit more sense. They were laughing in the dark, essentially. Where she says, "I'm here for Diamanto," and he's like, "Well, lucky Diamanto."
He says that?
Yeah. And when he died, they said something like, "Sad to die alone," and McCoy says something like, "Well, it beats the alternative." So like those moments I enjoyed, but that moment, like, it felt very Airplane. There's a bomb on the plane. The plane, what is it? It's a metal tube with wings, but that's not important right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it kind of translates as sarcasm. Spock is sarcastic, and I guess that's the only emotion that we can give that's not overtly emotional.
Right.
It's more just comedy. But I guess maybe Spock didn't sleep well that night. That's why he's so cranky with everybody.
After being on the ship for 2 years, it felt just too Spock. It felt too exaggerated for somebody who had been with humans for as long as he had been.
Unless he's just at his wit's end,
right,
with them. Right?
Exactly.
Which is very possible.
Well, and that's actually what I thought they were going to do with it. How they were talking about how the ship felt off, and the weird lady who was up and she was kind of doing things to the ship in general. I thought that it would somehow have had an impact on Spock, which is why he was behaving this way.
Yeah, I'm curious. This is one of the downsides of how we watch these episodes, which is just randomly jumping to different episodes, that we don't get sort of the natural progression of how not necessarily how they wrote it, but how or Nimoy plays Spock, or who plays Kirk? What's his name? James T.
Yeah,
No?
Yep, that's who plays him. James T. Kirk.
James T. Kirk. How James T. Kirk plays James T. Kirk, and how that kind of evolves. We don't get to see that very well, and it's not something that you really ever notice when you're watching a show from chronologically.
Right.
But if you were to watch the last episode of TNG, let's just say,
Yeah, like season 6, you're gonna have completely different characters from season 1. Right.
yeah, we talk about that. How they do seem to be more relaxed into the role versus the beginning where they're all kind of at attention.
Yeah, but we've also seen episodes later than this, and the writing was Spock and McCoy had banter where Spock understood McCoy's human slang.
I like seeing them have some banter where it's not just business the whole time.
Right. No, I would agree. So speaking of the characters and the writing and that kind of thing, this episode was written by the name is Michael Richards, but
Is that why there's so much racism in it?
right. But Michael Richards is actually a nom de plume for DC Fontana, and that's a female, and she actually was so upset with how much changed from her original concept that she asked for her name to be taken off, which is why it's dedicated to Michael Richards. But what I couldn't find was what the original idea was. And so so it's one of those, hanging chads for the audience, but
Right.
but yeah, I'm curious to know how this episode changed so much that she said, take my name off it.
My guess is that it had more to do with the lost civilization, that they added a lot of stuff with Spock, and they added a lot of stuff with the ship and how they're trying to investigate, how they got so far away, etc. And that they added all that and took away all the stuff with the. It's always scantily clad women that when they encounter new alien civilization.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, they're actually males. It's just that's how they look in the alien race.
Oh, that's convenient. Don't tell Kirk. Don't tell Kirk.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. He's a bit of a player. He's like, yeah, that's fine.
So Kirk beams down. They all beam down to investigate this strange planet, right?
Yes.
And there's immediately kind of an earthquake, and all the rock turns into styrofoam.
Oh, actually, so they actually built the set on a moving platform. So this was this was an episode where they didn't have to shake themselves around. I'm sure they did that with the camera anyway, but it's why some of them actually dropped to their hands and knees, because the shaking threw off their balance and they had to catch themselves.
So there's a moment, I'm sure you caught it, where Kirk, he does his whole no, like his fall, and I thought he was gonna fall off this huge cliff because they beam in and they're on this rock face, and it's like, oh, strangely, why would they beam onto a rock face that they now have to climb down off of? And then so he's about to fall off the rock face from the shaking of the earthquake, but then there's like 7 inches that he falls down onto the ground. I was like, oh, that sucks. I thought the stakes were immediately squashed.
Right.
He kind of does the cartoon thing where he propellers his arms back and forth 5 or 6 times before he falls down.
Right.
I can't believe you missed it.
I did. I totally missed that. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch that. That's funny.
So then, speaking of Dick Spock, Dick Kirk makes an appearance in full force. For some reason, directed entirely at Sulu.
Once in Siberia, there was a meteor so great that it flattened whole forests and was felt as far.
Mr. Sulu, if I'd wanted a Russian history lesson, I'd have brought along Mr. Chekhov.
He's like mean to Sulu this entire time. I'm like, well, maybe Sulu's going to die.
Right.
He's just trying to help.
Well, then he forces, he's like, this was Diamanto's job, but clearly he can't do it, so you need to go do this now.
Yeah. So the Enterprise is hurled across space, as we were warned.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of weird number, like 900 and something light years,
yes,
which is a very long way.
Yes.
Very far away.
And so it was like, they said it would take several hours to get back. And apparently the distance and the speed that they were traveling, like they would have to, traveling at warp 8 plus, it would have taken them 11 years to get back to where they were.
Yeah.
And to get back in the time that it actually did take them, they would have had to travel at warp 81.
Although they do go past warp 10, which I don't want to be too Star Trek nerdy here. I know in the later season or later shows they establish that anything over warp 10 is impossible or starts to be this weird scientific mumbo jumbo that just you start to turn into lizards or something. But they go over warp 10 in this episode. They go to like 11 point whatever or something like that. And I thought that was interesting that at some point, either somebody didn't watch the original series when they were writing the latter shows, or they decided to just totally disregard it. Like, why not start at warp 12?
Right. Well, so they actually, I believe it's between the Next Generation and then the original series. The canon is that it's kind of like the Richter scale for earthquakes, like how 15 years ago they changed that method, so it was a little bit more of a balanced scale, and that's kind of so. Warp 10, I think, is like warp 3 or 4 in TNG. Warp 10 in TOS. Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess they kept it consistent. That's all we care about.
I mean, they didn't. They're justifying it by, saying this, but
don't question Star Trek.
Oh no, that's the thing. Everybody questions.
Fixed it.
They then explain it. But wait, you said this in the original series. Oh yeah, that's because the method changed and the scale changed between the original series and Next Generation. Oh, okay, that makes
great.
sense.
Yeah, and what's great is all the fans are like, oh, that makes sense. That you had that planned the whole time and didn't just make this up on the spot. That makes more sense.
Yeah. So to be fair though, I think that it's it's kind of like the Pixar unified theory. I don't know if you've seen that or are aware of that.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of it is to make it match. Like, it's not to poke holes in it, because obviously you can do that. This isn't what Pixar is intending. Like, it's fun to try to figure out the Pixar unified theory. So it's kind of along the same lines. There are some people who definitively argue about the plot holes in Star Trek, but for the most part, I think fans want to make it work. And so, it's kind of the fun part of it is trying to make it make sense, basically.
Well, so you can buy the Star Trek T-shirt, and once you've done that, you said, "Well, I'm a big fan of this. This is not enough. I want to participate more with this thing that I love." And so once you've bought the T-shirt, you want to go farther into it, and this is how you do it. You interact with it, and this is what makes the internet so great: is that you have unlimited resources to interact with this thing, because as is with any kind of super popular thing, especially television shows where there's an ongoing canon, I guess you could say, is that you get to kind of interact with it. We're doing the same thing. We justify and rationalize all these kind of, I guess you'd call them plot holes all the time on the shows. Like, well, they were probably doing this and they were probably thinking this. They just didn't talk about it.
Right.
Giving them the benefit of the doubt where there is none.
Right.
No benefit. They didn't think about it. They weren't thinking about this and saying, well, we don't have to say that because of X, Y, and Z. It's D&D.
Yeah.
I guess. I've never played D&D.
Right. Neither have I. So based on our complete ignorance, that's what we say it is. It's kind of like baseball cards.
Yeah, my D&D cards are just as worn as my baseball cards. Let's put it that way.
I think that there's two ways of playing with it. You can play with it with a cynical, skeptical point of view, of saying like, well, they didn't think this through enough, it's bad. Or you can say, like, there are ways to work around it, so why don't we do that so it makes sense and we can continue to enjoy it? And I think,
right.
And I think there's kind of filling in the gaps, and then there's doing heavy lifting, And I think that we enjoy the episodes where we only have to fill in gaps, and we get irritated by the episodes where we have to do the heavy lifting.
Right. It's fun. It's fun to kind of crap all over the bad stuff, right? Too. It's kind of fun
for
to
sure.
do that, but
yeah,
it's in the backs of our minds. Yeah, the backs of our minds.
Because we have multiple backs in our mind. Yeah.
Well, there's two. There's the back of your mind, the back of my mind. So that's plural. What would be the right way to say that? The back of our minds.
I think so.
The backs of our minds.
I feel like the double plural is anyway. Let's focus on that a little bit more.
In the backs of our minds, I think that we obviously we love Star Trek and we love talking about it and it's fun. I think if we didn't love it so much, we would not be as critical of it, and so therefore want to pull it apart as much.
Oh yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. And then there are other things that we are passionate about where you just I think that we are just the right level of fan for this. Where I mean, I know we talked about this off mic, but where we know the history and we know the stories of Star Trek, but we aren't into the minutia of it. Like, we cannot name every alien in every part of the ship, and so
Yeah.
you know, so there are things where we are discussing that has probably already been discussed and settled in the Star Trek community, but it's not part of the zeitgeist of Star Trek, so it's not something that we have been a part of.
Our interpretation is kind of unmired by knowing about all of the interpretations that have come before us.
Exactly.
We have virgin interpretations that...
It's a great phrase, virgin interpretation.
If we were those people who... There'd be nothing to talk about.
Right.
Be like, oh, well, this guy talked about that before. This person has already settled that. It wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
So it's better that we're coming to this kind of in a blank slate, in a way. As you said, we're fans enough. There is a lot that's come before us, but we are the final say of what is actual canon and proper versus what is just fan speculation, right?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to be the definitive baseline of what is and isn't proper Star Trek episodes. Yeah. Yep. We are the final frontier of proper Star Trek.
We are the next generation.
We make it so.
Where we voyage to...
Got to figure out a way.
I don't think there's any way to... Yeah, Deep Space Nine is just not going to happen.
Nine being no in German. Into the cyber deep space? 9!
All of space! Not just deep space! 9!
There we go. We got it.
Kind of.
This is our Enterprise.
Into Schwarzenegger. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So anyway, the Enterprise is hurled across the galaxy, and the crew, or the bridge crew, is replaced by other people because the other people, are on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't be a Star Trek episode without a little bit of racism, because there is a new helmswoman by the name of Lieutenant Rada,
mm-hmm.
and Lieutenant Rada has a bindi, which is that colorful dot on the center of the forehead.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at a bit of a crisis here, because I don't know how to approach this. Because I want to know, was Lieutenant Rada simply a European Caucasian who practiced Hinduism? Or, which I'm sure happens, is a thing. Or was she effectively in blackface makeup because she was standing in for an actual Indian person who practices Hinduism?
Oh, I think it's definitely the latter.
Which is it's almost worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost worse than when in what's the name of the Tahiti syndrome, or Paradise Syndrome, where you have obviously European Caucasian men playing American Indians or Native Americans, and I don't know which one is worse. I maybe they're exactly the same in terms of racism, but boy was it blatant in terms of if you're right, if it wasn't just a person who doesn't typically practice Hinduism practicing Hinduism, or if she was standing in for somebody who she was not.
Well, I think it was Gene Roddenberry's way of being all inclusive. Like, he already has a black female, he's got an Asian, they've got a person pretending to be a Scots.
It's like, I guess Scotty is the least, and maybe Chekhov is the least.
Oh yeah, the Russian. Mm-hmm.
And Fraction, like, I guess because they're just doing accents,
right.
But the fact that they brought in somebody, of which there are a billion Indians, right?
Yes.
Not that they all necessarily practice Hinduism,
right.
But in terms of finding someone who at least in some way covers the physical description of somebody who would normally wear a bindi, fail on so many levels. I don't know.
I mean, I think that for the time it was progressive, because yes, I think it was somebody who was brown-faced, but
yes,
they did not do an accent, which I thought was definitely a step in the right direction for what they could have done.
Yeah. Right, that would have been so terrible.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely saw that, and like kind of a couple of the social justice flags went up, but I think. Given the time period, it was probably revolutionary to have somebody, have a bindi on camera and actually have some speaking lines, and they weren't a foreigner.
Yeah, but the problem is it was kind of subtle.
Yes.
Because she wasn't actually in any kind of dark makeup. I don't think, at least not any more than Spock would be or something like that. Like they were in makeup,
right.
But I don't know if they were. I don't think they were supposed to look darker.
I mean, it's kind of what happened in the Paradise Syndrome. Like it's one of those things where they had a culture that they wanted to represent, but they couldn't go so far as to hire someone who was genuinely either that religion or that ethnicity. And right. I think that was Gene Roddenberry's push and Paramount's compromise.
In a way, I guess it is commendable that he wanted to have that represented on screen, but in another way, he's sort of subverting the act by putting a white person in their place.
Right.
With Scotty and Chekhov, they don't look any different because they wouldn't look any different.
Right.
They're just doing different accents. In a way, that's more forgivable, I suppose. I don't know where I come down on. I mean, it was the 60s. I understand. I get it. Okay, so we go back. We cut back from the ship, and Kirk et al. Are trying to investigate ways to survive because they have no food or water.
Because everything's toxic, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is another 2 + 2 = 4 moment. So Kirk orders McCoy to say, he says, find out how these plants survive because they must be getting water somehow. We need to figure this out. And that should be enough because we're going to say, oh, they need to find out how the plants survive so we can survive. So we can find how they get water so we can get the water, right? That's what you're thinking when he says that.
Right.
That's the whole point of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then...
Bones, see if you can find out anything about the vegetation and your parasite. How do they get their moisture? If you can discover how they survive, maybe we can.
And I was like, wait, you don't need to say that. We did that math for you already.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe that's what made what's the writer's name? Michael
D.C. Fontana.
D.C. Fontana. Michael D.C. Fontana. Maybe that's why she went out of it because they were dumbing down the script to the point of it being just for babies.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that could definitely. They're turning to the camera because
that's basically what they did.
Right. Yeah.
So then the Enterprise, they hurtle themselves back to their point of origin at the planet. And at this point, they're well engrossed in trying to investigate what happened and how they were able to get that far in that short amount of time with that amount of energy. And Spock is such a badass in this episode because there's a moment where he's on the bridge and he's standing up next to the captain's chair and he gets a communication. So he twirls the chair around and hits the button on the chair. I'm like, that's amazing. Spock is the main event of this episode by far.
Yeah, which is so funny because I agree with you, but I feel like he was, like I said, just a little too Spockian.
Okay, so another thing that kind of bugged me about this episode was D'Amato, however you say it, he dies.
Yep.
And they're like, okay, we want to, and this is sort of how they discover the chemical makeup of the ground and the rock and everything, but they want to bury D'Amato.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed, I don't know, I understand the urge to bury your dead. I get that part. But the part where you're lifting heavy rocks to bury, and it was like a ton of rocks that they buried, which is surprisingly or interestingly how Kirk ends up being buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That they would waste all the time and energy to bury D'Amato when they have no water, no food. It looks like it's a desert landscape, like it's hot, maybe. I don't know, it's hard to tell. That they would waste all the time to do that and waste all the energy to bury. I mean, I understand that they want to show reverence to their dead, but do that afterwards. After you find some water and something to eat, then you can then waste the time and energy to do that.
Right.
Don't then stop looking for ways to not die to bury somebody who is dead already.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I think also that would have, it just would have played incredibly callous if they, they were like, we don't have time, and they just find a different area, just kind of ignoring the body that was 100 yards away.
Well, especially because if they don't find food and they're now marooned on this planet indefinitely, they're going to have to eat D'Amato at a certain point.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's in the manual, the Enterprise manual of survival. If you have a dead person, that's food.
Right.
Eventually.
Well, as soon as somebody dies and you are stranded, just use your phaser to cook up the meat so it lasts longer.
to cure the meat.
Yeah.
Phaser cure the meat. But in this scene, so that scene is kind of capped off with Sulu reporting some sort of data or some sort of anomalous data about the planet.
Like the door
I think
opening,
it's about
closing,
the rocks. Yeah. And instead of capping it with that new mystery or what, I don't remember what it was. Instead of capping it with that, they turn to Kirk, who says,
That's the problem, Sulu. We have only questions. No answers.
yeah, we know that.
Right.
We know that part. He just asked a question that nobody chimed in with an answer, and so we're going to do the math that nobody has the answer for it.
That's the problem, audience.
Yeah. Stay tuned. There might be answers later.
Spoiler, the answers were really weak.
Yeah, I guess not every mystery that the Enterprise encounters can be amazing.
Well, I mean,
Regardless of what the
the
ratings
mystery is amazing. You know, they kind of say, well, maybe the virus went to the rest of the alien planet and that, you know, this alien race is no more. But like they shoot the computer cube with a phaser and they don't take any of the technology with them to try to reverse engineer how this alien planet, this made planet, was able to blast the Enterprise almost 1,000 light years away, 990.7 to be exact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe that was the moment that they changed the scale because they upped their technology level.
Oh, yeah. There you go. This is the episode.
Yeah.
The episode that changed it all.
Then Kirk goes to sleep with a rock as a pillow. Did you notice that?
Yep.
He was comfortably resting his head on a rock.
He fell asleep so fast. Did you see that? Like,
and Sulu says, "I'm going to take first watch," and so everybody then like lays down and goes to sleep, and then Sulu walks outside of the visual scope of the group and starts keeping watch where he can't see anybody.
Yep.
Like, aren't you supposed to watch where everybody else is and not in some random uninhabited part?
circles the boulder, finds him dead. Oh,
Oh, that's awesome. That was fast.
right. Well, I mean, there's this alien being that can kill you by touching you and appears out of nowhere.
Well, see, what I would do is I would walk around the way that I came from to see if when I came back they'd be alive again.
Right.
Just to make sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's Star Trek. I don't know. Maybe I can see now why DC Fontana may not have wanted her name on this episode.
Right.
But it was still kind of an interesting episode. I still kind of liked it. Does that make me an asshole?
No. I mean, the premise, you know, the setting of the mystery and the peeling back the layers was really good. I think that, you know, like you said, they just needed to assume that the audience was smarter and not feed us the answers to the questions that were being asked.
Which is, you know, it's an element of the time
Exactly.
as well.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
which I get. I understand.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing about Star Trek. Like, yes, Star Trek is considerably racist by today's standards, but it was so progressive at the time.
I know.
You know?
I mean, we are probably enjoying the fruits of their labor in today's television and entertainment.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So the matter and antimatter fused together, and just the thing that I wanted to say here was this is it was a brand new set built for the episode, and it was built by I think his name is Matthew Jeffries. And so this is actually the first time we see a Jeffries tube.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, it's obviously not called that. It's not called that until TNG, but there you go. They say it's not designed to go into while they're traveling. And that's actually something that's mentioned several times in other episodes, like why they make the crawl spaces so tight. And the reason why is because you're supposed to go in when the ship is not in action and the gravity, whatever, is not turned on. And so you're just supposed to be able to like float through the tubes. And at that point, obviously, you know, you can do it without any problem.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Good call.
Thanks. I thought that was pretty cool.
So I guess they get to the end of the end of the episode. They arrive at the end of the episode. and honestly, I was a little confused about what had actually happened. I know that this was sort of the remnants of like, it was a computer controlling everything,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, what happened? Like, I couldn't understand why the lady was saying, I'm attached to you. I am for you. I didn't get that. I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't have the patience to go back and rewatch it.
No, right. That's a good point. And I don't have the answer to that. No, but so you understood how they died. Like, You got all that part?
No.
Okay.
No idea.
Okay. So I don't know if this was a planet built on top of their spaceship colony thing, or if they terraformed the planet to adapt to them. But in the process, something they awakened an organism that was a virus that killed off their people, and they didn't create the vaccine in time to save any of the people. They must have done something to eradicate it, or it wasn't airborne or something like that. But yeah, so the virus, and then that's kind of what either Spock or McCoy said, was the rescue ship that came must have contracted the virus as well, and that's why they've never seen or heard this alien race before.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it felt like they probably had pages and pages of stuff written as the solution, but did not have the time to explain it properly. Like, it should have been a 2-parter episode type of thing.
Almost, yeah, or like not have her come out so often and kind of get down to the computer a little bit sooner, so there could have been more time for
it's a teller scene.
It's that could be. Yeah. Anyway, that scene.
Yeah, I mean, it just felt very light at the end.
Yeah,
you're totally right. It just felt like they needed to get to the end of the episode. It was actually a fairly long episode to begin with, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It was something like almost 50 minutes or something.
Oh wow, I missed that. Yeah.
Maybe it was one of those things that was just they did not have the time when they were writing it because it had to be rewritten for whatever reason, and it could be. I don't.
Yeah.
We think of TV and scripting, everything is always super polished and ready to go, and there's always ample time to think. But I don't think that's true all the time, and especially back then when they were still figuring out how to do television.
Oh yeah, no, and writers' rooms. I mean, that's why there's writers' rooms and not single writers, because they have I think like a 6-week turnaround time from the time they start conceptualizing the episode, unless they have one banked, to the time that it's fully, in the can and ready to go to air.
So disappointing ending, but nonetheless, for me, still a proper Star Trek episode, I think.
Yes. Oh yeah. And so the episode, so that which survives, he says,
a remarkable woman.
And beautiful. Beauty is transitory, Doctor. However, she was evidently highly intelligent.
Kirk Enterprise, 5 to beam up. I don't agree with you, Mr. Spock.
Indeed, Captain.
Beauty survives.
So I was like, oh, that's what survives.
Yeah. Yeah. Kirk did the dude bro thing of like, nah, it's beauty.
Right?
That's what survives.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, she was hot.
Yeah. Am I right?
Up top. Oh, Spock, you pointy-eared machine.
Thanks for saving me, by the way. We would have totally died if you didn't come back.
You're my favorite brobot.
Oh, that's another T-shirt.
There you go.
I hope you're writing down all the T-shirts.
No, we got them recorded. I'm not worried about it at all. When we finally offer merchandise, which we might soon.
Well, yeah, but we have to go through what is now almost 40 hours of stuff.
Oh, I know.
We didn't.
That's all right. Thankfully, I've enjoyed what we've said so far, so I don't mind going back through and listening, which I had to do to find out which episodes were and were not proper Star Trek, which will also be up pretty soon, before the end of the year.
List, yeah. All right, let's see what we're watching next.
All right, sounds good.
Voyager, Season 5, Episode 6, Timeless, which is actually the 100th episode of Voyager.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like a special episode, and that's why it's kind of I think it was a fairly high production episode from what I remember. I remember it being a big deal.
Okay.
The blurb is, a miscalculation by Ensign Kim causes a fatal crash during Voyager's first test with slipstream travel. Slipstream travel.
Causes a fatal crash. What?
Causes a fatal crash during Voyager's first test with slipstream travel.
Okay. Their first test with slipstream travel. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it will actually be special, but they wanted us to think that it was special.
Right. Well, yeah. So.
Well, it's already captured your imagination.
I mean, well, because it says Ensign Kim causes a fatal crash. Like, and I'm trying to remember who dies.
I'm sure. From what I remember, a lot of people die, and there's possibly some time travel in this in this episode.
Oh, great. Okay. All right.
Yeah. They save all
Yay,
the time travel stuff.
Let's raise the stakes super high by knowing that all the characters are going to be fine at the end.
Yeah, Janeway's going to be really mad about something. Or just not mad. She never gets mad. She doesn't care enough to get mad. She just gets irritated. And so she'll be like, oh, we got back in time again? We're forward in time again?
She's going to be so done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go watch it.
Okay.